It was supposed to be just another short video. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, nothing that would later shake an entire nation. On the morning of that day, Michael Jackson recorded a simple message. He was calm. His voice was soft. He smiled. He even laughed once. To anyone watching, it looked like a peaceful, ordinary moment from the life of the most famous man in the world. There were no tears, no warnings, no sign that anything was wrong. But within hours, that same video would become one of the most discussed recordings in the history of modern music. Phones began to vibrate across the country. News stations interrupted their programming. Fans stared at their screens in disbelief. Because after that video was recorded, something happened. Something no one was prepared for. Something that made millions of people replay those final seconds again and again, searching for clues they had missed. Was it in his eyes? Was it in the way his voice paused for a moment? Was it in the words he chose? Or was the truth hidden in the silence between the sentences? What exactly did that final video contain that made the entire country react the way it did? Why did so many people say, we should have noticed it, but didn't? Tonight, you are about to uncover the real story behind that final recording, and the chilling detail that changed everything. Stay with me until the end of the story, because what you are about to hear will completely change the way you see that final video, and Michael Jackson himself. And if you feel the weight of this moment, if this story touches your heart even a little, the morning began in a way that felt almost peaceful. Sunlight slipped gently through the tall windows of Michael Jackson's bedroom, casting long golden lines across the floor. The world outside was quiet. No reporters, no crowds, no screaming fans gathered at the gates. Just the sound of birds in the trees and the distant hum of Los Angeles waking up. Michael had barely slept. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his thoughts drifting between the past and the future, feeling the strange weight of time pressing against his chest. There was nothing visibly wrong, no emergency, no crisis, and yet something inside him felt unsettled, like a quiet storm waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. He finally rose, moving slowly, carefully, as if the world itself were fragile. That was the morning he decided to record the video, not because anyone asked him to, not because a project required it, but because he felt an urge he could not explain. He showered, dressed in simple clothes, a soft white shirt, black trousers, and sat at the small table near the window, where the light was strongest. His hair framed his face, his eyes still heavy with exhaustion, but calm. A staff member asked if he was feeling okay. Michael smiled. "I'm fine," he said. "Just thoughtful today." He held the phone himself. No lights, no cameras, no makeup, no production. Just his face, the quiet room, and the steady morning light. He pressed record. "Hello, everyone," he began. His voice was gentle, familiar, the voice the world had trusted for decades. He spoke about gratitude, about the upcoming shows, about how thankful he was for the fans who had supported him through everything. He said he was excited. He said he was hopeful. He said he was ready. Nothing sounded strange. He even laughed once, a soft, brief laugh that felt warm and human. But those who would later analyze every second of that video would notice something else. His eyes. They lingered on the camera just a fraction too long. His smile faded just a second too quickly. There were tiny pauses between the sentences, moments where it seemed like he was choosing each word with care, as if the words themselves were heavier than usual. After a few minutes, he ended the recording. "Thank you for listening. I love you all." He stopped the video. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the dark screen, his reflection faintly visible. Then he placed the phone on the table and exhaled. No one in the room sensed anything unusual. No one felt danger in the air. To everyone present, it was simply another quiet morning in Michael Jackson's life. Later that day, the video was shared with a small group of people. A short clip posted online. Nothing official. Nothing announced. At first, the reaction was simple. Fans smiled. Comments filled with hearts and tears of joy. Messages poured in. He looks good. He sounds calm. He seems happy. But within hours, something changed. A radio host in Chicago paused during a broadcast. A journalist in New York replayed the video and frowned. A fan in Brazil wrote, "There's something different about his eyes." By the evening, the video had spread everywhere. Television screens, phones, computers, conversations in coffee shops and living rooms. People began slowing the footage down, zooming in, listening again, re-watching the pauses, studying the expressions. And the question started, why did he hesitate before saying, "I love you"? Why did his voice lower at the very end? Why did he look toward the window right before the recording stopped? Theories flooded the internet, some hopeful, some dark, some frightening. Then, just before midnight, the first breaking headline appeared. An entire country stopped breathing. But Michael, at that moment, was somewhere else. He was standing on his balcony, watching the city lights stretch endlessly into the distance. He wrapped his arms around himself as a breeze brushed against his face. His mind was heavy with thoughts he could not fully name. He did not know that the video he recorded that morning would soon be called the last normal moment. He did not know the nation would analyze every frame. He did not know that his calm smile would become a haunting image for millions. He only knew that something in his heart felt different. As the city below him continued to glow, Michael closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Please let everything be okay." And far away, screens across the world continued to replay his final message, unaware that the story of that day was only beginning. By the time the sun disappeared behind the hills of Los Angeles, the video was everywhere. At first, the reaction had been gentle. Fans were relieved to see Michael calm, smiling, seemingly at peace. But as night approached, the tone of the conversation began to shift. Something in the atmosphere felt wrong, not because of what the video showed, but because of what it didn't show. There was no chaos, no drama, no urgency, and that strangely made people uneasy. Television producers began to request copies. Radio hosts replayed short clips between songs. Comment sections exploded with speculation. "He looks tired. Did you hear the pause before the last sentence? He never says goodbye like that. I have a bad feeling." By 9 o'clock, the video had crossed every major platform. Analysts slowed the audio. Psychologists commented on his body language. Lip readers dissected the smallest movements of his mouth. Michael, meanwhile, was unaware of the storm he had set in motion. He sat in a quiet room, piano nearby, hands resting on the keys but not playing. His head was bowed, his expression distant. He had spent the afternoon speaking with his children, listening to their laughter, watching them run to the house as if nothing in the world could ever go wrong. For a moment, everything felt normal, but then his phone began to vibrate. One message after another. Calls from friends. Staff members knocking on the door. Security asking if he had seen the news. Michael, one of them said carefully, "People are reacting strongly to the video." He looked up confused. "It's just a message," he replied. What could be wrong with that? They showed him the screen. Thousands of comments. Headlines forming. Speculation everywhere. Michael read in silence. His face did not change at first. But slowly, a shadow crossed his eyes. Not fear, not anger, but something like realization. He whispered, "They're trying to find something that isn't there." But the truth was, something was there. Not in the words, not in the images, but in the timing. At 10:47 p.m., an emergency report appeared on one of the major news networks. The words were brief, unclear, confusing, and terrifying. An incident had occurred. Authorities were involved. Details were developing. Within minutes, every station interrupted its broadcast. The same phrase echoed across the nation. This may be connected to the video released earlier today. No one knew what that meant, but everyone felt the shift. Michael stood perfectly still as he watched the screen. His heart began to race. He pressed his hand against his chest, as if trying to steady it. "What's happening?" he asked. No one answered. Phones rang again. Voices trembled. Rooms filled with hurried footsteps. Outside his window, helicopters cut to the sky, their lights sweeping across the city. The peaceful morning was gone. Across the country, Families sat frozen in their living rooms. Fans stared at their phones in disbelief. Reporters whispered in dark hallways. The video, the calm, gentle message, was now being called a clue, a warning, a signal, a final calm before something no one could yet explain. Michael slowly lowered himself into a chair. For the first time that day, fear appeared on his face, and somewhere deep inside, he felt a strange certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The emergency broadcast that interrupted the late-night programs did not explain much, but the silence between each sentence said everything. Across the nation, living rooms went quiet. In hospitals, nurses paused in hallways. In restaurants, conversations stopped mid-sentence. In police stations, phones began ringing without pause. The message on every screen was the same. This story is still developing. But something in the tone of the anchors, the tension in their voices, the careful choice of words, made it clear that whatever had happened was not ordinary. At Michael's home, the staff gathered around the television. No one spoke. Even the children, sensing the weight of the moment, stayed silent, standing close to one another at the edge of the room. Michael's eyes remained fixed on the screen. A reporter finally appeared outside a building surrounded by flashing lights and police vehicles. The camera angle was wide, intentionally distant, as if the network itself was afraid to look too closely. "We can confirm," the reporter said slowly, "that an incident connected to earlier online activity involving Michael Jackson has triggered a nationwide security response. At this time, officials are not releasing specific details." Michael felt the room spin. "How could this be connected to my video?" he whispered. His manager shook his head. "We don't know yet." But deep inside, Michael already knew something was terribly wrong. His phone rang again. This time it was a government liaison, a voice he had spoken to only once before, after a serious security threat years earlier. "Mr. Jackson," the man said, calm but firm, "we need you to remain where you are. Do not leave your property. Do not respond to any media. We will send a team to speak with you directly." "What is happening?" Michael asked. There was a pause. "All we can say for now is that the video you released earlier may contain information that was misinterpreted by certain groups. We're trying to assess the situation." Michael's heart dropped. Misinterpreted how? Another pause. Dangerously. He lowered the phone. Outside, the sound of helicopters grew louder. The reaction across the nation. Social media erupted. Millions of posts appeared within minutes. People replayed the video frame by frame. Strangers argued over every word, every pause, every breath. Some believed the video was a message of peace. Others believed it was a coded warning. A small but vocal group claimed it was a confession of something terrible. None of them were correct. But the chaos no longer cared about truth. By midnight, international networks picked up the story. Europe, Asia, South America, everywhere, the same question was being asked. What happened after Michael Jackson's last video? In New York, crowds gathered outside television studios. In London, reporters camped outside American embassies. In Tokyo, the stock market wavered as uncertainty spread. And in Los Angeles, Michael sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling, his breathing shallow. He kept thinking about the children. Prince, Paris, Blanket. They had watched him record that message that morning. "Daddy, are you sure you don't want to say more?" Paris had asked. Michael had smiled. Sometimes the quiet parts say everything. Now the world was screaming. The first official statement. At 12:38 a.m., the government finally released a short statement. Certain communications released earlier today are being reviewed in connection with potential threat. There is no immediate danger to the public. This is a precautionary investigation. The word threat shattered the remaining calm. Michael stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "A threat?" he said. "What threat? I didn't threaten anyone. I only spoke about love." His manager placed a hand on his shoulder. I know. But outside his gates, more security vehicles arrived. Armed officers moved into position. Michael looked through the window at the lights reflecting off the trees. This had all started with a message meant to bring peace. How had it become this? Inside the investigation, unbeknownst to Michael, several intelligence agencies were now examining the video with extreme seriousness, not because of what he said, but because of what someone else had done with it. Within hours of its release, a dangerous group had taken his words, edited them, twisted the meaning, and circulated a manipulated version that appeared to signal an imminent act of violence. The altered version spread through hidden networks before authorities could contain it. And now the country was reacting to something Michael had never intended, a father's fear. Back at home, Michael asked to see his children. They gathered around him on the bed. Blanket crawled into his lap. Prince sat close, trying to be brave. Paris's eyes were wide with worry. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" Michael swallowed hard. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "We're just in the middle of something big. But I promise you I will protect you." He wrapped his arms around them, holding them tighter than he ever had before. For the first time that night, tears filled his eyes. Outside, the world continued to spiral. And somewhere far away, people were preparing for consequences no one yet understood. The night stretched endlessly, thick with tension and unanswered questions. Michael did not sleep. The house, usually alive with soft music and laughter, had become a fortress of whispers, phone calls, and hushed footsteps. Outside the gates, security vehicles remained parked with engines running, their red and blue lights painting the palm trees in slow, pulsing shadows. Inside, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. At 2:11 a.m., a black convoy rolled into driveway. 3 vehicles. No sirens. No flashing lights, only purpose. Michael stood in the living room when the doorbell rang. His manager opened the door to reveal 2 federal agents and a woman in a dark coat, her face calm but serious. They stepped inside, introducing themselves only by their last names, their eyes already scanning the room. "We need to speak with Mr. Jackson privately," the woman said. Michael nodded and gestured toward the dining room. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing so hard he could hear in his ears. They sat. The woman placed a folder on the table, but did not open it. "Mr. Jackson," she said, "your video has been used as part of a manipulated message that circulated through extremist networks within hours of its release. The edited version includes phrases and symbols inserted by others, making it appear as though you were signaling or endorsing violent action." Michael's breath caught. "That's impossible. I would never." "We know," she said quickly. "That's why we're here. We believe you are a victim of the manipulation, not a participant. But the impact is already spreading." The altered message reached several individuals who were already under surveillance for planning coordinated acts of violence. Michael closed his eyes. "So my video triggered this?" "It became the vehicle," she replied. "Your name gave it power. Your face gave it credibility." Michael felt a wave of nausea. The message he had recorded with nothing but hope in his heart had become a weapon in someone else's hands. "Are people in danger?" he asked quietly. The agent beside her answered. "We intervened before anything occurred. Several arrests were made. No casualties. But the public doesn't know that yet. They only know that something involving you caused a national alert." Michael leaned back in his chair, his chest tight. "I never wanted this." "We understand," the woman said. "But the country is reacting to fear, not intent." She slid the folder toward him. Inside were screenshots of manipulated video, his face frozen beside words he had never spoken. The sight made his stomach twist. "They used me," he whispered. "Yes," she said. "And now the world thinks something is terribly wrong." Michael rubbed his temples. "What happens now? You will remain protected. We are working to release a statement clarifying the situation, but we must dismantle the remaining networks before doing so. Once the truth becomes public, those responsible will attempt to scatter." Michael stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, the quiet street was now filled with shadows of men in vehicles and watchful movement. "My children," he said. "They didn't ask for this." "We are aware," the woman replied gently. "They will be kept safe." When agents left nearly an hour later, the house felt even quieter than before. Michael returned to his bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. He stared at his phone, scrolling through headlines from around the world. Jackson linked to National Alert. Last video sparks investigation. Unanswered questions after mysterious message. Not one of them reflected the truth. The sun was beginning to rise when he finally heard the soft knock at the door. Paris peeked inside. "Daddy," she whispered. Michael opened his arms, and she ran to him, followed by Prince and Blanket. They climbed on the bed beside him, their small bodies warm and real and grounding. "What's happening?" Prince asked. Michael hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Some people took something I said and twisted it. Grown-up problems. Nothing you need be afraid of." Paris searched his face. "But you look scared." He smiled faintly. Sometimes being brave feels like being scared. They sat together in silence as the light crept across the floor. By mid-morning, the world outside was louder than ever. News trucks crowded the streets near his property. Helicopters hovered above the neighborhood. Fans gathered beyond the gates, holding signs that read, "We love you, Michael, and tell us the truth." Inside the house, Michael remained still. He knew what he had to do. He turned to his manager. "I'm going to speak." "Are you sure?" the man asked. Michael nodded. "They used my voice. I'm taking it back." Within the hour, cameras were arranged in the living room. No dramatic backdrop. No grand stage. Just Michael sitting in a simple chair, dressed in black, his face pale but calm. The live broadcast began. "My friends," he said softly, looking straight into the lens, "the video I shared with you came from a place of love. I learned tonight that others twisted my words and turned them into something dangerous. I had no part in that. I would never support violence of any kind. Across the nation, people lean closer to their screens. I am deeply sorry for the fear this caused. I want you to know the truth. The situation has been contained. No one was hurt, and those responsible are being held accountable. Please do not let fear drown out compassion." His voice trembled, but he continued. "We live in a world that is hurting, and sometimes even a message meant to heal can be used to harm. But we must choose to keep loving anyway." He paused. "I am choosing love." The broadcast ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flood came. The headlines changed. The truth spread. The tension began to release its grip on the nation. Michael sat alone in the quiet after the cameras were gone. His hands were still shaking, but his heart felt lighter. Outside, the helicopters drifted away. The crowd slowly dispersed. The storm was passing, but he would never forget how close it had come, and how a simple message of hope had nearly changed the world forever. The house did not return to normal. Even after the broadcast calmed the country and the headlines shifted from panic to explanation, something inside Michael's world had changed. The walls still stood. The room still held the same furniture. The piano still rested beneath the window, but the feeling of safety, that invisible thing he fought his entire life to preserve, had cracked. In the days that followed, investigators came and went. Cybersecurity experts moved through the house with laptops and quiet voices. Agents spoke into radios on the back lawn, while helicopters no longer hovered but remained within reach. Michael watched it all from the balcony, his arms folded, his face distant. He had survived storms before, scandals, trials, betrayal, rumors, but this felt different. This had crossed from personal pain into something much larger. His image, his voice, his presence had nearly become the spark of something catastrophic, and he could not stop thinking about how easily it had happened. Late one afternoon, Michael wandered into the music room. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor, landing on the old upright piano he had owned for years. He sat down slowly, as if approaching a memory. His fingers hovered over the keys. Then he began to play. The melody that came out was soft, unfinished, trembling, like the world had been that night. He closed his eyes and followed the sound wherever it wanted to go. He played for nearly an hour, lost inside the notes, until he heard quiet footsteps behind him. Catherine stood in the doorway. She did not speak at first. She simply listened. When the song finally faded, Michael turned. "I didn't know you were there," he said. She smiled gently. "I didn't want to interrupt." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I keep thinking, what if I hadn't posted that video? What if I had stayed silent? Catherine walked to him and sat beside him on the bench. Then you wouldn't be you. He shook his head. They used my heart against me. They used your name, she said, but your heart is still yours. He stared at the piano. It almost destroyed everything. She placed her hand over his. It didn't. You stopped it. Michael exhaled slowly. That evening, his children joined him in the living room. They sprawled across the rug with coloring books and toy animals while he sat on the sofa, watching them. For the first time in days, the house felt quiet again. "Daddy," Paris asked, "are people still mad at you?" He thought for a moment. Some are confused. Some are scared. But many understand now. Prince looked up. "We do." That nearly broke him. He lay down on the carpet between them and stared at the ceiling. Their small shoulders pressed against his arms. "You know," he said softly, "the world is very loud. Sometimes it forgets how to listen." Blanket crawled closer. "But you always listen." Michael smiled. Over the next week, messages poured in from around the globe. Letters, emails, videos. Parents thanking him for calming their children. Teachers playing his speech in classrooms. Strangers saying they chose not to give up because of what he had said. He read every one. But the fear did not vanish overnight. One evening, as he walked alone to the garden, his phone vibrated. A message from the investigation team. They had found the final source of the manipulation, the person who had initiated the edits. The group responsible for distributing the altered message. It had taken only hours to twist something pure into something dangerous. Michael stared at the screen. "How fragile everything is," he whispered. He went back inside and sat at his desk. He opened a blank notebook and began to write. Not lyrics, not plans. A letter. He did not know who it was for. Maybe the world, maybe himself. He wrote about responsibility, about intention, about how words, once released, no longer belong to the speaker alone. He wrote about love being both powerful and vulnerable. He wrote about fear, how it moves faster than truth, but never lasts as long. When he finished, the pages were full. He closed the notebook and leaned back, exhausted. In the quiet hours of that night, when the house slept, Michael stood on the balcony and watched the city lights shimmer in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were still talking about him, still debating, still wondering. He realized something then. He could not control the world's reaction, but he could control what he chose to stand for. The next morning, he began work on a new project, not an album, not a tour, but a foundation focused on media responsibility, emotional resilience, and protecting young voices in a digital age. He called leaders, educators, counselors. He asked hard questions. And slowly, something good began to grow from what had almost been disaster. One night, as he tucked his children into bed, Paris looked at him and said, "You were brave, Daddy." He paused at the door. "I was scared." She smiled. Brave is when you're scared, but you still do the right thing. Michael closed the door gently behind him. In the silence of the hallway, he finally allowed himself to believe it. The storm did not end with headlines. It ended quietly, the way all real storms do, not with noise, but with understanding. Weeks after the night that had shaken the country, Michael Jackson stood on a simple stage inside a small theater in Los Angeles. There were no flashing lights, no screaming crowds, no banners bearing his name. Only a few hundred chairs, most of them filled with teachers, parents, students, counselors, journalists, and community leaders. Cameras were present, but not for spectacle. They were there to listen. Michael walked to the microphone without an entourage. No gloves, no jacket, just a white shirt, dark slacks, and tired eyes that carried both pain and resolve. He paused, scanning the room. "I want to talk to you about something dangerous," he began. "Not fear, not violence, not hate." He leaned closer to the mic. Silence. The room did not move. "For years," he continued, "I believed silence protected me, that if I didn't explain myself, the truth would eventually rise on its own. But the world we live in now doesn't wait for truth. It fills the space with whatever fits." He told them what had happened, not in technical language, not with blame, but with honesty. How a single video had been altered, how intention had been twisted, how fear had multiplied faster than facts, how millions had believed something that was never real. And what frightened me most, he said, was not what they did with my image. It was how easily they could have done it to anyone. He spoke for nearly an hour about responsibility, about listening, about choosing empathy before reaction, about protecting children from the noise of the world. When he finished, no one clapped. They were too busy breathing. In the months that followed, the foundation he had quietly started began to change lives. Schools implemented new programs. Media outlets adopted new verification policies. Young people learned how to question before believing, how to pause before sharing, how to recognize manipulation when it tried to wear the face of truth. Michael did not appear on magazine covers for it. He didn't want to. He spent his days traveling quietly, sitting in classrooms, listening to teenagers talk about anxiety and pressure and the crushing weight of being constantly watched online. He held their hands. He answered their questions. He never once spoke about himself. One afternoon, while visiting a school in Northern California, a boy asked him, "Aren't you scared people will twist your words again?" Michael smiled gently. "Of course I'm scared, but fear doesn't decide my actions anymore." The boy nodded, as if that answer mattered more than anything else. Back home, the mansion had finally settled. The helicopters were gone. The agents had packed up their wires and laptops. The house felt like a home again. One evening, Michael sat in the living room while his children worked on homework at the table. Prince was writing an essay. Paris was sketching. Blanket was building a crooked tower of blocks beside the couch. Michael watched them and felt something rare. Peace, not the kind that ignores danger, the kind that survives it. Later that night, he returned to the balcony where weeks earlier he had stood staring into the city, uncertain of the future. The lights were the same. The sky was the same. But he was not. He had learned that fame was not his greatest power. His voice was, and not the one that sang, the one that chose. Before going inside, he pulled out his phone and recorded a short message. No script, no production, just truth. "Wherever you are," he said softly, "remember this. The loudest thing in the world is not truth or fear. It's the choice between them. And that choice belongs to you." He posted it and closed the app. Inside, his children were waiting. "Daddy," Blanket said, "are we safe now?" Michael knelt and hugged him tightly. "We're always safer when we take care of each other." Blanket smiled and hugged him back. That night, as the house slept, Michael sat at the piano and finished a song he had started days earlier. The melody was no longer trembling. It was steady, strong. When the last note faded, he rested his forehead against the keys. And for the first time since the storm had begun, he slept